On June 27, 1947, American Kenneth Arnold reportedly saw 9 flying saucers, a term that was used for all unexplained aerial sightings until 1952, when the U.S. Air Force adopted the term UFO, or unidentified flying object. Just a few days after Arnold's statement, on July 8, former Mac Brazel from Roswell, New Mexico, reported to authorities that a saucer had crashed on his property. Some soldiers immediately showed up and recovered the wreckage of the craft and the bodies of small, gray creatures. According to the July 8, 1947 local newspaper edition, Lieutenant Walter Haw declared, at the orders of Colonel Blanchard, that the Army had recovered the wreckage of the craft, which had been taken to Fort Worth. On July 9, in a press release, General Ramey claimed that it was only a weather balloon. The document, called the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, stamped by the War Department with the date of July 22, 1947, claimed that extraterrestrial bodies had been found in Roswell that looked like they had been dissected like frogs. Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, who was a member of General MacArthur's staff in Korea, then a member of the National Security Council and head of the Army Research and Development Foreign Technology Division of the United States, published the book the day after Roswell in 1997. Here he claimed that in 1961, General Arthur Trudeau entrusted him with a secret file containing objects from a UFO that crashed in Roswell. Corso presented the respective objects to IBM, Hughes Aircraft, and Bell Labs as having been procured from the Soviets. In this way, the U.S. industry would have developed microprocessors, high-energy laser weapons, anti-satellite and anti-missile systems, fiber-optic-based equipment, infrared binoculars, Kevlar used in bulletproof vests, and so on, starting in the 1960s. According to Corso, the information obtained in this way allowed the Americans to win the Cold War. Following numerous requests, the U.S. Army and the CIA responded that they cannot confirm or deny Corso's claims in his book. On November 18, 1952, Rear Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter, former director of the CIA, prepared an 8-page document classified as Top Secret/Magic. This document, which served as a preliminary briefing to the new President of the United States at that time, Dwight D. Eisenhower, stated that on September 24, 1947, President Truman authorized the creation of an ultra-secret task force called Majestic 12, often abbreviated MJ-12 or Magic 12, to monitor the UFO phenomenon at the highest level. This group was to report exclusively to the President of the United States. The original group consisted of leading personalities of the time. Rear Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter, the first director of the CIA. Dr. Vannevar Bush, the #1 scientist in military research. James V. Forrestal, Secretary of the Navy and First Secretary of Defense. General Nathan Twining, Chief of the Air Force Technical Services. General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Dr. Detlev Bronk, physiologist and President of Johns Hopkins and Rockefeller Universities. Dr. Jerome Hunsaker, Aeronautical Engineer. Rear Admiral Sidney W. Sowers, the first director of the Central Intelligence Group. Gordon Gray, Secretary of the Army. Dr. and astronomer Donald Menzel, director of the Harvard University Observatory. General Robert M. Montague, commander at Fort Bliss, near White Sands, and of the Special Weapons Center at Sandia Base, Albuquerque. Dr. Lloyd V. Bertner, leader of a space program. As James Forrestal resigned in March 1949 due to a nervous breakdown and committed suicide 2 months later, he was replaced by General Walter Bedell Smith, the second director of the CIA. The document confirms the crash of a UFO at Roswell and the recovery of the craft along with 4 humanoid beings. Also in 1952, a squadron of 6 UFOs engaged in a dogfight with F-93 fighter jets over Washington, D.C. In a letter sent on April 16, 1954 to Meade Lane, former director of a research center in San Diego, Gerard Light claimed that for 2 days he witnessed flight demonstrations by extraterrestrials with their spacecrafts at the Air Force Muroc Base, now Edwards, in California. The demonstrations were attended by a number of political and scientific figures, including President Dwight Eisenhower. Light wrote, "I have seen 5 distinct types of flying machines, studied and handled by our officials of the Air Force, with the assistance and permission of the Etherians." Count Clancarty, a member of the House of Lords in Great Britain, stated in the 1990s that a British pilot whom he considered a gentleman of the highest integrity had told him that in February 1954 he saw several extraterrestrials disembark from their spacecraft in Palm Springs, who wanted to officially announce their presence on Earth. President Eisenhower opposed it and the visitors accepted his point of view, but not before offering some aerial demonstrations to underline their technological advancement. After the extraterrestrials left, those present were forced to swear to keep secret everything they had seen. Dr. Hank Craftsman from Encino, California, stated in the second issue of the 1993 Unexplained magazine that at that time, he participated as a Dutch Royal Marine military member in a NATO training program at the Edwards base. On February 20, 1954, he saw some extraterrestrials and their ships in a hangar. There were several personalities present, such as President Dwight Eisenhower, Wernher von Braun, Albert Einstein, Victor Schauberger, and Howard Hughes. French writer Robert Charroux, who cites Meade Lane, is firmly convinced that extraterrestrials landed at the Muroc base in 1954. Discussions with them were attended by President Eisenhower, a senior government official, and 2 officers. One of them later stated, "The 2 men who descended from the ship spoke English well and said they came from a planet near the Betelgeuse star. The living conditions on that planet would be identical to those on Earth. That's all I can tell you." In 1955, American General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander in the Korean War, declared to the New York Times after his retirement, "The nations of the world will have to unite, for the next war will be an interplanetary one. The nations of Earth will have to someday make a common front against attacks by beings from other planets." 7 years later, in a speech to West Point Military Academy graduates, he asserted, "We are witnessing the final conflict between the human race and sinister forces from another galaxy." In 1959, Dr. Wernher von Braun, the father of V-1 and V-2 rockets, commander of Hitler's space project and later one of NASA's key architects, declared, "We are facing forces much stronger than we have believed until now, whose origin is currently unknown to us, and I can't say more now, but we are engaged in a process of contacting these forces." In 1970, UFO researcher Alan Greenfield met von Braun at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base while studying declassified files. When asked how he had developed so much technology in such a short time, von Braun confessed that he had been helped by extraterrestrials. In 1954, von Braun's professor and one of the fathers of astronautics, Hermann Oberth, said, "UFOs are designed and operated by highly intelligent beings. They do not originate in our solar system and maybe not even in our galaxy." In 1955, Oberth wrote in an article, "I don't believe that Russia is manufacturing UFOs. On the contrary, I believe they originate exclusively outside the Earth." Regarding the high military technology of the Germans during World War II, Oberth, then a member of the rocket program, said they were helped in this regard by people from other worlds. In 1972, 2 independent film producers from Los Angeles, Alan Sandler and Robert E. Menegger, were called to the Pentagon, where they were shown photographs and a film featuring gray-skinned, living and dead extraterrestrial beings. The following year, they were called to the Air Force Norton Base in San Bernardino, California, where they met with the head of the Air Force's Special Investigations Bureau, who revealed that on March 25, 1964, at the Holloman Military Base, White Sands, New Mexico, around 5:30 a.m., radar had detected 3 UFOs approaching. One of them had landed on the runway and 3 non-earthly humanoid beings had emerged, around 1.55 meters tall, wearing tight-fitting jumpsuits and helmets that seemed to be braided with ropes. They had gray-blue skin, wide-set eyes with cat-like vertical pupils and very large noses. They headed towards a base building where discussions took place. The entire event was filmed. Radio amateur Terry Clark from Alamogordo claimed that on April 30, 1964 he intercepted a conversation between a military aircraft and the Air Force Control Center at Holloman, White Sands. The pilot of AB-57, flying on a routine mission, shouted, "We spotted a UFO. It's egg-shaped and white. And a few minutes later, it's on the ground. The UFO is on the ground." On April 9, 1983, at the Kirtland Military Base, journalist Linda Moulton Howe saw a secret document discussing UFO crashes in Aztec, Roswell, Kingman, and northern Mexico, from which wreckage of ships and gray creatures were recovered. One of the extraterrestrials was alive and was taken to the Los Alamos base, where it lived until 1952. The document claimed that on April 25, 1964, at the Holloman Military Base, there was a meeting with extraterrestrials where the American government returned several non-earthly corpses, and the visitors gave something unspecified in return. Milton William Cooper, a non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force, claimed in 1989 that while working at the Pacific Fleet Command in 1972, he consulted two materials, Project Grudge/Blue Book Report Number 13 and a summary of Operation Majority, MJ-12. Report Number 13 stated that between 1947 and 1953, there were 27 UFO crashes, from which 41 corpses and 5 living extraterrestrials were recovered. UFOs have a base on the dark side of the moon, which was filmed by American astronauts, but the authorities refused to talk about it. The report contained photographs of the 1964 landing at Holloman Air Force Base, images of extraterrestrials and autopsies. At Holloman, a treaty was concluded which provided that extraterrestrials would deliver technology in exchange for permission to abduct humans for experiments. It was also stipulated that the American government must minimize information regarding the presence of extraterrestrials on Earth, dating back at least 25,000 years. Certain secret societies have been in contact with extraterrestrials for thousands of years, the best example being the Illuminati, which today brings together the top figures of world finance. Report Number 13 was also seen by another person named Bill English, who miraculously survived 2 assassination attempts. According to Milton William Cooper, the United States government has committed to building a number of underground bases to shelter UFOs and exchange technological information. In 1963, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy gave the MJ-12 group an ultimatum to cease these activities, threatening to make the whole affair public. He also demanded that the group inform the American people about the presence of extraterrestrials on Earth within a year. Among these documents is a note from J.F. Kennedy dated June 28, 1961, in which he asked the CIA president for a report on the operations of the MJ-12 group and their connections to the psychological aspects of the Cold War. In addition, a CIA report from August 3, 1963 speaks of an intercepted telephone conversation in which actress Marilyn Monroe told reporter Dorothy Kilgallen that she wanted to reveal details of her love affairs with John and Robert Kennedy, as well as other secrets. The first of these referred to a visit that President Kennedy had made to an Air Force base to inspect objects from outer space. 2 days after that conversation, the actress died in suspicious circumstances. After these obstacles were removed, the construction of underground bases continued unhindered, especially in the reservations of some Indian populations in New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, or Nevada, under the pretext of creating atomic shelters. In 1961, astronomer and physicist Frank Drake, together with a group of astronomers, physicists, and biologists, founded the SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, organization in order to discover life on other planets. On August 15, 1977, astronomer Dr. Jerry Eman, who was working on the SETI project at Ohio State University, intercepted an intermittent signal from the constellation Sagittarius. The signal lasted for 72 seconds. In 1978, Maurice Chatelain, former head of NASA's communication systems and designer of data processing and communication systems for the Apollo missions, confirmed in a book that during the Apollo 11 mission in 1969, Neil Armstrong reported observing 2 UFOs on the moon. Otto Binder, a former NASA employee, confirmed the story. And in the early 1990s, Dr. Sergei Bogisi and Professors Vladimir Ajaja and Alexander Kazantsev from Moscow University stated that Soviet espionage had monitored the details of the 1969 moon landing via radio, recording Armstrong's conversation with the Houston Control Center, which revealed that 2 large-sized UFOs had been seen near the American lunar module. It looks like not only the Apollo 11 mission had an extraterrestrial encounter. Apollo 12 was followed by 2 UFOs throughout its entire journey to the moon. The Apollo 15 crew observed parallel tracks in the lunar crater Hadley Apennines, imprinted in lunar dust as if a vehicle had passed there before them. Astronauts on the Apollo 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 missions returned with hundreds of photographs showing UFOs. In 1996, former astronaut Edgar Mitchell spoke, during a radio interview, about his belief that extraterrestrials have visited Earth. In a film shot on September 15, 1991, during the STS-48 mission of the Discovery Space Shuttle, about a dozen bright spots moving in different directions at variable speeds can be seen. At one point, one of the objects approached the shuttle. After a burst of light, the object abruptly changed its trajectory at an angle of 120 degrees and, accelerating, it disappeared into space. 2 seconds later, the spot previously occupied by the object was traversed by 2 bright streaks. In 1972, NASA attached a plaque with a message for extraterrestrial beings to the Pioneer probe, designed by Carl Sagan and Frank Drake. 5 years later, another message, also made by Sagan, was attached to the Voyager probe. This message took the form of a golden record album containing recordings of a child's cry, wind, waves, rain, animals, folk, and classical music, as well as images of the largest structures made by humans and greetings in 55 languages. In the same year, on November 26th, television broadcasts in southern England were interrupted to be replaced by a message from the extraterrestrial being Ashta, who announced that they would soon land and urged humanity to abandon nuclear weapons. The only pilot in the world holding all flight certificates issued by the Federal Aviation Administration, John Lear from Nevada, claimed in 1987 that he learned from his friends in the CIA that, through an agreement reached by MJ-12, the human species had been sold to extraterrestrial beings. Thousands of extraterrestrials performing sinister experiments on humans and animals are housed in multi-level underground laboratories and bases in Nevada and New Mexico, including the Dulce base. There are also a large number of Earthlings imprisoned there forever. In 1979, a confrontation broke out at the Dulce base in which 44 researchers and a large number of soldiers were killed. After 1980, the MJ-12 group began to realize the mistake they had made, with the number of people abducted being greater than agreed upon and the technologies received being mere surrogates, far from the performances of extraterrestrial weapons and vehicles. Therefore, MJ-12 developed a defensive system to destroy extraterrestrial ships coming from space. This would be the true reason for the establishment of the Strategic Defense Initiative program, also known as Star Wars, and not the defense against Soviet nuclear missiles. The same thing was claimed by Philip Corso in his 1997 book, The Day After Roswell. Bill Hamilton, a former Air Force employee, claimed that in 1979 he received information from a government employee about the U.S. military's involvement in monstrous genetic experiments carried out by extraterrestrials in underground bases. Also, a former photographer in the underground laboratory at Dulce, intelligence officer Thomas C., along with a former staff member of the base, an individual with the pseudonym Jason Bishop, said that horrific experiments, mutilations, and hybridizations are taking place there. Those subjected to these treatments have rebelled several times, with some even managing to escape. Ukrainian UFO investigator Anton A. Anfilov claims that the first UFO recovered by the Russians was the one that crashed on January 21, 1959, near Gdynia, in Poland. At that time, an extraterrestrial corpse was also found, which was autopsied at an institute of the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Similar cases followed, with corpses and UFOs transported to the Military UFO Research Center at Unit 25840 in Odintsovo, near Moscow. Extraterrestrial biological entities captured, alive or dead, are being studied in an underground laboratory near Dmitrivka. Military Unit 73790, located near the village of Chikir, also deals with UFOs, examining captured vehicles in order to reproduce them. In the Ural Mountains, a similar underground complex was built to the one at the Dulce base in New Mexico. Anfilov revealed the location of 9 other military units involved, claiming that Russian authorities have been corrupted by small gifts from extraterrestrials in order to turn a blind eye to the illegal activities they are committing on Earth. German Jan van Helsing and Milton William Cooper, a former officer of the U.S. Navy's intelligence, revealed to the public that the Cold War was just a huge diversion designed to capture huge funds used for collaboration with extraterrestrials. Van Helsing also wrote that in 1943, a messenger from the planet Venus appeared in front of Stalin's office. When a sentinel tried to catch him, the extraterrestrial disappeared. Similarly, Hitler also had a visit from a being from Venus. Another Venusian named Estes Platou appeared in front of Winston Churchill. When the British Prime Minister tried to strike him, he hit only the air. At Platou's next appearance, Churchill, advised by the renowned English medium Egerton Sykes, held a druidic cross in front of him and told him to leave. And the Venusian disappeared without a word. Physicist Paul Benowitz was convinced in 1984 that the United States was on the verge of being invaded by 2 warring extraterrestrial races. At the end of 1988, Bob Lazar was hired at S4 facility in Area 51. There, he studied a 120-page document which revealed that the United States had possession of several UFOs. The file also contained autopsy reports and black and white photographs of biological entities, information about extraterrestrial civilizations, conflicts or cooperation between aliens and American authorities. At the base, Lazar saw 9 flying saucers and even examined a disk with a diameter of 8 meters and a thickness of 4.5 meters. His task was to reproduce the ship's reactor and gravitational propulsion mechanisms. George Knapp, a Las Vegas TV reporter who introduced Bob Lazar to the public in 1989, claimed to have found more than 12 people who confirmed these revelations, including an officer who led several military programs at Nellis Air Force Base. In early 1990, President Gorbachev declared that the UFO phenomenon exists and must be treated seriously. In April 1990, Air Force Colonel General Igor Maltsev released a synthesis of over 100 UFO observations reported by different military unit commanders. Nick Pope, who led the Air Staff Secretariat 2A at the UK Ministry of Defence between 1991 and 1994, which examined UFO reports, published the best-selling book Open Skies, Closed Minds. For the first time, a government UFO expert speaks out in 1996. Here, he claimed that there are about 13 million people on Earth who have seen something. 90 to 95% of these observations can be explained in ordinary terms, but at least 650,000 observations remain unexplained. He also argued that we have no evidence that a very real phenomenon like UFOs is harmless, adding that if underestimating the enemy is considered a mistake in the military world, failing to recognize its existence is a fatal mistake. In 1991, news spread worldwide about the discovery by American and Russian observatories of an artificial satellite in Earth's orbit, unusual in size and advanced degree of technology, shaped like a diamond prism at a 52-degree angle. NASA reportedly declared at the time that the satellite was indestructible and could observe all aspects of human life. In March 1997, television stations across America, including CNN, broadcasted footage of UFOs resembling boomerangs passing over Phoenix, Arizona, heading towards the Mexican border. On July 16, 1999, a 90-page document, entitled UFOs and Defense, What Must We Be Prepared For, also known as the Cometa Report, was officially presented to French President Jacques Chirac and Prime Minister Lionel Jospin. The preface was signed by Air Force General Bernard Norlane, former director of the Institute of Advanced Studies for National Defense, IHADN, and the introduction was written by André Lebeau, former president of the National Center for Space Studies. The Cometa Working Group was chaired by Air Force General Dennis Letty, and its members included Air Force General Bruno Lemoyne, Admiral Marc Merlot, Political Science Dr. Michel Augrin, Armaments Engineer General Pierre Biscond, Police Superintendent Dennis Blanchard, Christian Marchal, Research Director at the National Office for Aeronautical Research, and Physicist General Alain Orzac. The document has 7 appendices, covering radar observations in France, UFO observations made by astronomers, life in the universe, colonization of space, the Roswell case and possible disinformation, the age of the UFO phenomenon and elements of chronology, reflections on psychological, sociological, and political aspects of the UFO phenomenon. The report shows that French authorities have taken UFOs seriously for a quarter of a century, starting with instructions given to the gendarmerie in 1974 and continuing with creating the Study Group on Unidentified Aerospace Phenomena in 1977 and then the Phenomena Expertise Service for Atmospheric Entry. The result of these investigations made the authors of the study to conclude that the extraterrestrial hypothesis, even if it cannot yet be proven, is the only one that can explain all the data available at present, being extremely serious in its possible consequences. Dr. Stephen Macon Greer, the initiator of the Disclosure Project, had a list of over 400 people at the beginning of 2001 who claimed that, through their official duties, they had seen UFOs and their occupants, recovered fragments, extraterrestrial technologies used on Earth, and so on. They were required to swear that they would not divulge any of this information and were even threatened with death, but they would be willing to testify before the U.S. Congress about what they saw if they were released from their oath. Dr. Greer recorded on videotapes about 120 hours of depositions from around 100 of these witnesses. On May 9, 2001, a press conference dedicated to the Disclosure Project took place at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., where over 20 personalities, military personnel, researchers, government officials, spoke about events they claimed to have witnessed, crashed UFOs, captured extraterrestrials, extraterrestrial technologies used by the military, radar recordings, footprints on the moon, photographs seen in secret documents, incidents at nuclear missile silos. Among the witnesses there were officials such as Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin, who served at the White House starting in 1959 under Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Brown, a hero of World War II, as well as other officers and employees of the Air Force and NASA. After nearly 2,000 years, the Christian Church maintained its belief that we are alone in the universe, apart from God, angels, saints, and demons. However, Father José Gabriel Funes, the head of the Vatican Observatory and scientific advisor to Pope Benedict XVI, admitted in May 2008 the possibility of extraterrestrial life on other planets. Far from being a coincidence, NASA made a similar statement on the same day. In October 2011, the same Father Funes claimed again the possibility of extraterrestrial life, adding that if they exist, they are also children of God. Why can't we talk about an extraterrestrial brother? They would be part of creation, he said. On March 6, 2009, NASA launched a Delta II rocket into space, carrying a new telescope named after the German physicist Johannes Kepler, to search for extraterrestrial life. The telescope is focused on a particular area of the Milky Way called the Orion Arm or the local spur. In November 2010, Dr. Allah Shaheen, the head of the archaeology department at the University of Cairo, stated that the information about extraterrestrials building the famous Egyptian pyramids could be true. When asked if these pyramids could contain extraterrestrial technologies or even a UFO in their structure, Dr. Shaheen was very vague in his response and only said, "I cannot confirm or deny this, but there is something inside the pyramid that does not belong to our world." Although delegates at the conference on ancient Egyptian architecture were shocked by this statement, Dr. Shaheen refused to make any further statements regarding the extraterrestrial connection to the pyramids. A group of researchers working on the Human Genome Project claimed to have found extraterrestrial genes in human DNA. The project began in 1989 in the United States and over the years has attracted scientists from the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Germany, and China. The researchers believe that extraterrestrial DNA has been inserted multiple times inside our cells during various periods of human evolution, allowing us to develop much more rapidly than other creatures. The researchers even have their own vision of the Creator, believing that an extraterrestrial form of life created living beings, which it planted on various planets, including Earth. On April 11, 2011, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, released previously secret files, over 2,000 pages long, that prove the presence of extraterrestrials among us. Perhaps the most anticipated file is the one about the Roswell case, which after 64 years publicly acknowledges that in 1947 the remains of a ship and 4 extraterrestrial bodies were recovered. In addition to all these statements, there are tens of thousands of testimonies from people all over the world who claim to have seen UFOs or have had close encounters of the third kind with beings from other worlds. Whether they are contacts or abductees, their numbers are increasing significantly each year. In 1991, it was established that 2% of adult Americans had experienced a series of events that suggested possible extraterrestrial abductions. From all these testimonies, we can conclude that there are beings on Earth who have come from other planets and are collaborating with the world's great powers, piloting highly sophisticated ships, living in secret underground bases, abducting people whom they subject to various genetic experiments, especially of a sexual nature, and are responsible for the technological leap of humanity at least in recent decades. Most of them claim to have been on Earth for a very long time, being the gods of the past. In the face of this evidence, the existence of life on other planets can hardly be denied by anyone with even a little bit of gray matter. This does not stop me from doing so. I do not doubt the existence of these entities, present in all times and cultures of the world. But do they really come from other planets? We are told that they are almost like us, humanoid beings, with DNA similar to ours, much more technologically and mentally advanced, capable of traveling great distances in cosmic space. Are they really as they are said to be? In 2012, 2 scientists from Princeton University in the United States declared that the theory put forward by NASA, which suggested that billions of planets could support life forms, was actually just optimistic thinking. Astrophysicists Edwin Turner and David Spiegel, cited by the Daily Mail, stated that it was very possible for Earth to be an exception, where life developed abnormally quickly, while on other planets there may not even be primitive forms of life. The very ancient fossils discovered on Earth have suggested that life is common in the universe, since it appeared here so soon after the formation of the planet. But what we know about our planet cannot be applied to other planets, the 2 scientists argued. These optimistic ideas about a universe full of life are actually based only on assumptions, on nothing concrete, they continued. Even the recent discovery of planets similar to Earth does not necessarily mean that they harbor life forms. We only project our knowledge and expectations onto them, explained David Spiegel. To discover the truth, the sources of the information we have about extraterrestrials must first be analyzed. In addition to ordinary people who claim to have had close encounters of the third kind, we have many disclosures from former military personnel, politicians, scientists, or clerics. Military personnel who have worked or are still working for their governments, scientists who work for governments or simply receive government funding. And about the politicians, we won't even go there. How can we know that these people have revealed secrets of their governments and not fulfilled orders by making public information given by their bosses? How do we know that these incredible stories are true? When have governments ever shared the truth with the masses in sensitive issues? More and more evidence is emerging of our leaders' lies in cases such as the 1969 moon landing, the death of J.F. Kennedy, or the 9/11 attacks. We know that the United States, for example, used lies to attack Afghanistan and Iraq at the beginning of the third millennium. Several years have passed since the leader of Iraq at that time, Saddam Hussein, was killed, and those weapons of mass destruction that served as a pretext for invading the country still have not been found. The Islamic State, ISIL or ISIS, the most powerful terrorist organization of all time, is led by CIA agents. After the Roswell incident, a spokesperson for the U.S. Army stated that a UFO had crashed, while the next day an Army statement claimed it was a weather balloon. Decades later, a declassified FBI file supports the claim that a UFO did indeed crash on that day. Who is telling the truth and who is lying? Officially, Hitler committed suicide in a bunker in Berlin in 1945, yet a declassified FBI file claims that the former Nazi leader sought refuge in Argentina. These are just a few examples of the lies that our governing systems feed us. In this case, how can we trust governments and militaries when we have been proven time and time again that they give us lies? How can we believe that former politicians or military personnel, individuals with more or less important positions, are not still working for their governments and risking their lives to share the truth with us? The same goes for representatives of religious institutions, who are part of a proven system of mass manipulation. Furthermore, we see that extraterrestrials have been heavily promoted in recent decades, appearing in numerous films, TV shows, documentaries, radio and TV programs, books, magazines, and online media. The increase in appearances of extraterrestrials in all kinds of audio, video, and printed materials does not suggest a leak of information, but rather an intense promotion. If the governments of the major powers wanted to keep the existence of beings from other planets hidden, how is it that they cannot stop this constant promotion? Considering that governments control the media, common sense tells us that they are the ones promoting the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But why would they do this? Is it because they suddenly want to share the truth with us but lack the courage to do so directly, resorting to carefully staged leaks of information? They have always hidden the truth from us, but now they allow us to learn it in one area. Established in 1958, NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the agency responsible for the space program of the United States and civil and military aerospace research, has only constantly told us that there is life on other planets, although we have not yet discovered it. NASA's certainty is curious, considering that in more than 6 decades it has not provided a single piece of evidence, limiting itself to public statements without any support. Why do NASA, military personnel, politicians, clerics, and scientists keep telling us that there is life on other planets, even though no one presents any evidence, and this hypothesis is being heavily promoted? Besides, it has been long claimed, and evidence continues to emerge, that the world is governed by a malevolent secret organization, led by an elite that aims to enslave the Earth's population through any means, economic, social, political, and religious. If this powerful organization wants us to be slaves, while controlling almost everything related to the media, why would they allow the truth about extraterrestrial life to be revealed? What if things are different from the official version? If the existence of these entities that govern that secret organization, which in turn controls the major governments of the world, cannot be hidden anymore, wouldn't they keep us away from the truth about their nature and purpose on our planet by heavily promoting the extraterrestrial hypothesis? What if the gods are not what they seem to be? Promoters of the ancient astronauts or visitors from other planets hypothesis base their theory solely on the advanced technology of so-called extraterrestrials. We have writers such as Erich von Däniken, Zecharia Sitchin, or David Icke, or documentaries like Ancient Aliens, produced by the TV channel History, as examples. Only the material part of these creatures is promoted, while the spiritual part is deliberately ignored. Manipulators would not want the public to know that many contacts with extraterrestrials are not made through close encounters of the third kind, which include UFO abductions, but through clairvoyance, channeling, or automatic writing. A considerable number of contacts manage to write meaningless texts through automatic writing, sometimes using hieroglyphic characters, and many claim to have traveled to other planets or dimensions through astral projection. Here are some examples. In the book You Are Responsible, written in the 1950s, London taxi driver George King claimed to have been helped by extraterrestrials to visit the planet Mars in an out-of-body state. Ruth Norman claimed to have made numerous trips through astral projection and to have had clairvoyant contacts with supercelestial beings from Mars and Venus. In the 18th century, Swedish theosophist Emanuel Swedenborg claimed to have made psychic trips to other planets in our solar system, where he met St. Augustine and Apostle Paul. Betty Andreessen Lucas said that one October evening in 1978 she experienced an astral projection after hearing a buzzing sound above the roof and found herself in a place where a crowd of little beings were working around 3 tables on which were 3 people covered with sheets. In July 1986, she again experienced an astral projection after a little gray being dressed in a jumpsuit appeared next to her. In the book Encounters from 1989, psychiatrist Edith Fiore presented the case of patient Sherry, who was abducted and taken inside a ship where, during an abdominal operation, her etheric body floated through the room, looking down at her physical body lying on a table surrounded by little beings. After a close encounter of the third kind on October 2, 1984, Karen L. from Norway was contacted several times through automatic writing and astral travel. She also made contact with an entity named Zader, who confessed that most contacts with earthlings are made on an astral level, especially to avoid the immense fear that physical contact would cause. After a series of encounters with beings claiming to come from the constellation Taurus, Swedish woman Helena Gustafsson began receiving their messages through telepathy or automatic writing. With the powers granted to her by them, she healed a paralyzed elderly woman. Like Helena Gustafsson, after contact with visitors from other worlds, regardless of the nature of the contact, many have developed so-called paranormal abilities such as clairvoyance or precognition. However, the public should ignore this part and believe that we are visited by beings similar to us from other planets, who are only technologically and intellectually advanced, crossing the universe with the help of spaceships like those in science fiction movies. UFO abductions do not always occur in the physical realm, but also in the spiritual realm, as Betty Andreessen Lucas' story shows, where she experienced astral projections in 1978 and 1986 under the influence of visitors. Surprisingly, such a case appears even in the New Testament. In the second epistle to the Corinthians, Apostle Paul talks about a man who was abducted and taken up to the third heaven, acknowledging that he does not know whether the person was taken with or without his body. I knew a man in Christ about 14 years ago, whether in the body, I cannot tell, or whether out of the body, I cannot tell. God knoweth winky face such an one caught up to the third heaven. And I knew such a man, whether in the body, or out of the body, I cannot tell, God knoweth, how that he was caught up into paradise, and heard unspeakable words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. 12:2-4. This is not the only mention of an alien abduction in the Bible. In the Old Testament, Enoch and Elijah were taken to heaven by the God Yahweh to live with him in the celestial world. Therefore, the existence of a connection between the UFO phenomenon and religion should not surprise us. For example, many extraterrestrials have transmitted prophetic messages to contacts. Some have claimed to be ancient gods or representatives of a god. Ashta Sharon, whom George Van Tassel, George Adamski, and others spoke of, considered himself a spiritual teacher and commander of the 8th Galactic Sector. Ruth Montgomery called the extraterrestrials she was in contact with as spiritual guides. According to Frank Strange's statements, the Venusian Valthor believed himself to be a kind of interplanetary missionary in the service of the Lord, who felt that humanity had strayed too far from God and needed help to be brought back on the right path. Furthermore, he implied that he was the biblical Jesus. The sociologist and political science professor Courtney Brown conducted several remote viewing sessions in which he found himself transported to a distant realm where he met a being that looked like Buddha. Through remote viewing, he also claimed to have traveled to other planets, where he met with St. Augustine and Apostle Paul. The 9 entities with whom Lab 9, led by Andrea Puharich, constantly made contact, said that God is no one but us together, the 9 principles of the Lord. There is no other God but us, the 9, united. The 9 also claimed to be the Elohim of the Jews and the Eons of the Gnostics, with Jesus being the last of us to visit planet Earth. In September 1974, one of them claimed to be Harmachuz and Adam, gods of ancient Egypt. French researcher Jean Sider noted that religious apparitions are closely linked to UFO sightings. By 1991, Lucien Blaise of Lyon had catalogued 29,654 religious sightings that occurred in 1,272 locations in 69 countries. Of these, over 3/4 belonged to the Virgin Mary and about 10 times fewer to Jesus. After World War II, the years in which these sightings increased were also the years in which waves of UFOs intensified. In addition to all of this, there have been religious movements devoted to extraterrestrials, such as the Scientology cult, the Raelian sect, the Heaven's Gate sect, the Aetherius Society, and the International Congregation of Enki. Christianity has also adapted to the extraterrestrial trend through statements by the head of the Vatican Observatory, who admitted the possibility of extraterrestrial life on other planets, even speaking of an extraterrestrial brother. Considering the links between the UFO phenomenon and religion, we cannot ignore the spiritual part of the extraterrestrial story, no matter how much those who hold the reins of humanity may wish to do so. Romanian researcher Dan D. Farkas noted in UFOs from the Other Realm that prophecies entrusted to contacts or chosen ones are often proven to be false. Frenchman Jean Sider said about UFO visitors that they systematically lie about everything related to their nature, the world they come from, and their intentions towards human societies, which can easily be observed by studying the statements of abductees or contacts. Moreover, he concluded that extraterrestrials have been creating illusions since ancient times, especially of a religious nature, a conclusion that other researchers have also reached. Professor Robert Stagger mentioned a reality game that has been imposed on us by a hidden intelligence above us. David Bartley spoke of a great interactive, holographic game that the UFO phenomenon invites us to play, wondering if religious apparitions and UFOs are holograms or not. American professor Leo Sprinkle is convinced that a superior intelligence involves humanity in various games, some very serious, others less so, of a social, psychological, spiritual, medical, biological, sexual, political, or military nature. He believes that the objective of many abductions is an educational program aimed at implanting ideas for a defined purpose in the minds of the chosen ones and gradually spreading through them these ideas among the masses. These phenomena are part of a plan elaborated and controlled by superior intelligences. Romanian physicist Florin Gheorghida, like other authors, warned that some of the sources of messages which we come into contact with could be deceitful spirits that have the vocation of leading us astray, as opposed to evolved spirits, the only ones worthy of trust. In UFOs, The Secret of Aliens, OVNIs, Le Secret de Aliens, in French, from 1998, Jean Sider wrote, "Thanks to the super-powerful technological means at their disposal, visitors are capable of creating any type of illusion in the minds of abductees." An example of such an illusion is offered by Irene Ray, who was abducted along with her friend in the American state of Oregon. He recounted that he was forced to have sex with an attractive alien female, but Irene remembered that throughout the abduction, a gray little man fixed his gaze intensely on her friend, performing a hypnosis-induced illusion. All these modern conclusions should not surprise us, considering that in almost all cultures there have always been deceitful deities. In Christianity, Satan is considered the great deceiver, with even the book of Revelation in the New Testament mentioning the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, 12:9. Loki from Scandinavian mythology was well known for his deceitful ways. Tribal religions in Africa or Oceania have many deceitful deities. In Hinduism, Krishna is the illusionist god who deceives his enemies, disorienting them with the phantasms he creates. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna admits, "Veiled in the illusion produced by my magic, I am not revealed to all," 7:25. If extraterrestrials are experts in illusions and systematically lie about everything concerning their nature, the world they come from, and their intentions towards human societies, how can we trust their claims? Especially those related to their true nature and place of origin. Many abductees have noticed that visitors have the ability to become invisible and penetrate solid bodies, with many declaring that they have seen extraterrestrials passing through doors or walls. In UFOs, The Secret of Aliens from 1998, Jean Sider wrote that these entities can penetrate any matter, somehow in the manner in which electromagnetic waves do, gaining access to any human brain that interests them. When asked how they do this, visitors attribute the miracle to technology. Ruth Montgomery declared that her spiritual guides, who travel through the universe solely with the power of thought, explained to her that their abilities are based only on knowledge of some laws of the universe that we humans have not yet discovered. These allow them to disintegrate and reassemble solid bodies at will. And on July 12, 1988, in a letter to Ray Fowler, Betty Andreessen Luca reproduced information received from extraterrestrials. When asked how they can pass through doors, they replied that they take advantage of the duality of wave particles and certain properties of quantum mechanics. Passing through a solid object can be done by controlling the vibration levels. It is a very simple operation. These structures are very lax. She was also explained the method by which they can become invisible. The method includes controlling the vision and hearing of witnesses, but also a subtle annihilation by superimposing a complementary wave of the energies dissipated on this occasion. Also, many times they only travel with their spiritual essence. Is it true, then? Do they use technology to penetrate solid matter, or is this another lie? Or perhaps another illusion? The ability of these entities to become invisible to the human eye appears not only in modern research, but also in chronicles of the past. In the second book of Kings of the Old Testament, when the Syrians were preparing to attack the Israelites, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire that were invisible. At the request of the prophet Elisha, Yahweh blinded the Syrian attackers. The army of God was also seen by Jacob in Genesis, and Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host," and he called the name of the place Mahanaim, 32:1-2. In 66 AD, the Roman commander Cestius withdrew his troops from Jerusalem apparently for no reason. The Romans returned in 70 AD, led by Titus, and besieged the city. In the Jewish War, historian Flavius Josephus wrote about the reason for the Roman withdrawal in 66, a few days after the holiday. On the 21st day of the month of Artemisius, an unbelievable and amazing phenomenon occurred before sunset, and the crowd was able to see chariots and armies of armed soldiers suddenly appearing in the sky. Mentions of invisibility are also found in Homer's Iliad, where the gods often influence the course of battles unseen by humans. For example, during the duel between Menelaus and Paris, when the Spartan king grabbed the Trojan prince by the helmet's tail, choking him, goddess Aphrodite, sheltered by invisibility, broke the helmet strap, thus allowing Paris to escape. When Menelaus tried to strike his enemy with his spear, the goddess carried the Trojan prince away through the mist to his chamber at home. When Ares threw his spear at the mortal Diomedes, goddess Athena, wearing Hades' helmet of invisibility, deflected it. Wearing the same helmet, the goddess also deflected Soko's spear thrown at Odysseus, for Pallas Athena did not allow it to pierce his harness. Athena is the one who gave the mortal Diomedes the gift of seeing the gods. Thus, the warrior attacked Aphrodite, forcing her to withdraw from the battle, and also attacked Apollo 3 times, only giving up after the god threatened him. Also, in the Iliad, the gods used to hide in a mist in order to act without being seen. And when they decided to appear before mortals, they did not do so in their true form, but in human form. For example, the goddess Iris, taking on the appearance of Prince Polites, announced to the Trojans that the Achaeans were coming to attack them. Athena took on the form of Laodocus Antinorianus and convinced Pandaros to shoot Menelaus with an arrow. Ares transformed into Acamas, the lord of the Thracians, to urge on the Trojans. Hera took on the appearance of Stentor to encourage the Achaeans. Poseidon took advantage of Zeus's retreat and, taking on the form of Calchas, encouraged the two Ajax, transformed into toes to convince Idomeneus to return to battle, and took on the appearance of an old man to encourage Agamemnon. Apollo transformed into Mentes to inform Hector that Menelaus had killed Euphorbos, took on the form of Periphas to inform Aeneas that Zeus still supported the Trojans, transformed into Phenops, son of Asius, to inform Hector that Menelaus had killed Aetion, transformed into Lycaon to give the demigod Aeneas courage and strength, and hid Agenor in a dense fog to keep him from being killed by Achilles, and then took on his appearance to lure the demigod away from Troy. Athena transformed into Phoenix and encouraged Menelaus. She also took on the appearance of Deiphobos and proposed to Hector to defeat Achilles together. It was too late when the Trojan prince realized he had been tricked. In Homer's Odyssey, Athena transformed herself into Mentes, into Telemachus, into the daughter of Demas, took on the appearance of a maiden, and even changed the appearance of Odysseus. In Virgil's Aeneid, Iris transformed herself into Barrow, Neptune into Phorbas, Apollo into Butes, and Iuturna into Camers and Metaceus. Venus disguised herself as a Spartan maiden, which made her son scold her. "Why, cruel one, do you deceive your son so many times with vain appearances?" We note so far that these gods, experts in illusions, have the ability to pass through solid matter, become invisible to the human eye, and change their appearance, probably through illusions that they do not hesitate to offer to mortals, whom they have shamelessly lied to from the beginning. From the statements of those who have had encounters of the third kind, it looks like space visitors are divided in two categories in terms of physical appearance: the tall and blonde ones, with a Nordic appearance, and the small and gray ones, with large heads. Is this their real appearance, or are we also dealing with an illusion here? Dr. Frankie Strange, who claimed to have met the Venusian Val Thorne in the Pentagon building, said that although he had a perfectly human appearance, his hands were soft, as if they were not made of flesh and bones, and his fingers were smooth, without fingerprints. According to writer Whitley Strieber, one night in 1986 he was taken by two small creatures to a room filled with almost translucent apparitions that resembled corpses. In the book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, published in 1994 by Professor John E. Mack, 28-year-old Sarah remembered, under hypnosis, encountering skeletal entities during an alien abduction, and another time seeing a being sitting on a silver metal throne with a filamentous translucent sphere surrounding its head, behind which was discernible a human skull. In the ancient Sanskrit text Bhagavad Gita there is the clearest mention of the real appearance of the gods, which is terrifying and totally different from the one shown to mortals. During the Kurukshetra war, Prince Arjuna asked to see the true form of the god Krishna. I desire to see your cosmic form, O Supreme Personality, if you think that it is possible for me to see. O Lord of all yogic mystic power, kindly show me your universal self. 11:3-4, the god granted his request, but not before warning him, but you cannot see me with your present eyes. Therefore I give you divine eyes. Behold my divine magic force. 11:8, similar to what happened in the Iliad, when Athena gave Diomedes the gift of seeing the gods. The true appearance of the god was not at all what the prince had imagined, with many mouths and eyes, with many wondrous sights, with many divine ornaments, with many divine weapons lifted high, wearing garlands and raiment divine, anointed with celestial perfumes, full of all wonders, endless God with faces on all sides. If 1,000 suns were to rise in the sky at once, the blaze of their light would resemble the splendor of that supreme spirit. At that time, the son of Panda saw the entire universe, divided in many ways, but standing as one in the body of the God of gods. 11:10-13, I see you with infinite arms, stomachs, mouths, and eyes. Your form stretches in every direction. I see no beginning, no middle, and no end to your body, O Lord of the universe. Form of the universe. 11:16, beholding your amazing and terrible form, the three worlds tremble, O great soul. The multitudes of gods are hastening to you, some, fearful, with joined palms pray to you. 11:20-21. Not only were the gods frightened, but Arjuna was as well, as the true form of Krishna made him tremble with fear, beholding your vast form, with many mouths and eyes, O Lord of universal form, with many arms, thighs, feet, and bellies, with many terrible teeth, worlds are trembling, and so am I. 11:23, shaken to the depths of my being, I cannot keep my composure and calm. 11:24, looking at your terrifying teeth and mouths like the fire of the apocalypse, I no longer know where the horizons are. I cannot find a place of refuge. Mercy, Lord of the gods, shelter of the world. 11:25, and all these sons of Dhritarashtra, along with the multitude of earthly kings, Bhisma, Drona, and the son of Sutta with our army leaders, are hastening towards your terrifying mouths with terrible teeth. Some, caught between your teeth, are seen with their heads crushed. 11:26-27, as moths rush towards a blazing flame for destruction. So does humanity rush towards your mouths for destruction. 11:29, tell me who you are, terrible form. 11:31, seeing the unseen, I am terrified, my mind trembles with fear. Mercy, Lord of the gods, shelter of the world. Show me only your form, O God. With crown, with mace, with discus in hand, that is how I want to see you, be again with your four-armed form, O you with 1,000 arms, who takes all forms. 11:45-46. To calm poor Arjuna, Krishna resumed his human form, which we know from Indian iconography. The prince was lucky to have survived such a sight, probably without major traumas. The Poimandra's text from Corpus Hermeticum contains a similar story. About the god Poimandras, shepherd of men, Hermes Trismegistus said, after saying this, his appearance changed, and immediately, as soon as you could blink, all things were revealed to me. And I saw an infinite sight, all things became light, gentle and unimaginably pleasant, and I was completely enchanted looking at them. 1:4. Like Prince Arjuna, Hermes was frightened by the appearance of Poimandras. After he said this, he looked me in the eye for a long time, until I trembled at his appearance. 1:7. In the Pistis Sophia of the Gnostics, Jesus had the same effect on the deities when he passed through their spheres. In the firmament, all the archons and all the powers and all the angels there were suddenly disturbed because of the great light that I had. They looked at the garment of shining light that I wore and saw the mysteries that contained their names, and they were very frightened, and they were greatly afraid and greatly troubled and glorified the innermost of the innermosts. Chapter 11. In the first sphere, all the archons and all those in that sphere were equally disturbed, and they were even more disturbed and were seized with great fear, and they all glorified the innermost of the innermost, being greatly frightened and troubled. Chapter 12. In the second sphere, fate, all the archons and all those in fate were disturbed and fell together and were seized with great fear, seeing the great light that surrounded me, and they were seized with even greater turmoil, and they were seized with great terror. They worshipped me and glorified the innermost of the innermost, being greatly frightened and troubled. Chapter 13. When Jesus reached the 12 eons, all the angels of the eons and their archangels and their archons and their gods and their lords and their powers and their tyrants and their powers and their sparks of light and their luminaries and their unmatched ones and their unseen ones and their ancestors and their triple powers all saw me shining brightly, and the light that surrounded me had no measure. And they were equally disturbed and seized with great fear when they saw the great light that surrounded me. And their great disturbance and great fear reached the realm of the great unseen ancestor and the three great triple powers. And due to their great fear that came from their disturbance, the great ancestor ran constantly from one part of his realm to another, together with the three triple powers, and they could not close all their realms because of the great terror that had seized them. And they all moved their eons together in all their spheres and all their orders, being frightened and greatly troubled by the great light that surrounded me. Chapter 14. When all those in the 12 eons saw the great light that surrounded me, they were all equally disturbed and fled from one part to another in the eons. And all the eons and all the heavens and their entire arrangement were equally disturbed because of the great fear that had seized them, for they did not know the mystery that had occurred. Chapter 15. Regarding the light that surrounded him, Jesus said that it was much brighter than the one he had on earth, when the garment of light came upon me, for the world could not endure the brightness as it truly was, otherwise the world would have been destroyed along with everything in it. Chapter 14. This fear of Jesus' light, which engulfed all the worlds he passed through and the divinities that inhabited them, is identical to that in the Bhagavad Gita, caused by the real aspect of Krishna. Beholding thy stupendous and terrible form, the three worlds are trembling, O great soul. The multitudes of gods are coming to thee, some afraid, with hands folded in adoration. 11-20-21. An ancient Egyptian text from 1200 years ago, written on behalf of Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, asserts that Jesus also had the ability to change his appearance. The Jews said to Judas, "How shall we arrest him, for he does not have a single shape but changes his appearance? Sometimes he is ruddy, sometimes he is white, sometimes he is red, sometimes he has the color of wheat, sometimes he is pale like the ascetics, sometimes he is young, sometimes he is old." Therefore, Judas kissed Jesus in the Gethsemane garden to identify him to the Roman authorities before he changed his appearance. The change in his physical appearance is also mentioned in the New Testament. When Jesus went up a mountain with 3 of his apostles, and was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light, Matthew 17 verse 2, and he was transfigured before them. And his raiment became shining, exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can white them, Mark 9 verses 2-3, and as he prayed, the fashion of his countenance was altered, and his raiment was white and glistering, Luke 9 verse 29. He metamorphosed also after his resurrection, being unrecognizable to the apostles. In the Gospel of John, Mary Magdalene saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus, she supposing him to be the gardener, 20:14-15. When some of the apostles went fishing in the Sea of Tiberias, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus, 21:4. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus accompanied 2 disciples who were walking to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs. They did not recognize him because their eyes were holden that they should not know him. 2400 hours 16, only at dinner their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight, 2400 hours 31. Also in chapter 7 of the Gnostic book Pistis Sophia, Jesus recognized his ability to change his appearance, and when I entered into the world, I went into the midst of the rulers of the sphere and took on the likeness of Gabriel, the angel of the eons, and the rulers of the eons did not recognize me but thought I was the angel Gabriel. In Greek mythology, Zeus appeared in human form to one of his lovers, Semele, the mortal mother of Dionysus. Advised by Hera, Semele asked the king of the gods to reveal his true form. Zeus, who had sworn on the river Styx to grant her any wish, was forced to comply, and Semele was completely burned when she saw his real aspect. In the Old Testament's Exodus, Moses expressed his desire to see the face of his God, Yahweh, who replied, "Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me, and live." 33:20. This is understandable, considering the story of Dionysus' mother. However, Yahweh found a way to please his servant by showing him his back, and it shall come to pass, while my glory passeth by, that I will put thee in a cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass by. and I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen. 33:22-23. This did not fully satisfy Moses, but at least it saved him from death by spontaneous combustion. And we cannot help but again wonder if this is the true appearance of the gods or if it is once again an illusion. In the book Encounters, Dr. Edith Fiore described the case of a patient, Victoria, who believed that invisible entities were entering and leaving her body, stealing things from her. One remained with her, trying to control her, and Victoria felt the need to constantly fight that entity to preserve her personality. Another patient, Diane Tai, remembered being abducted by UFOs and complained of being possessed by creatures from the unknown. These cases led Dr. Fiore to write that extraterrestrials can incorporate, temporarily or permanently. Writer Philip K. Dick claimed that at one point he was possessed by an ionized, atmospheric, electric life form capable of traveling through time and space at will, a state that lasted for 4 years. In the book Extraterrestrials Among Us, George C. Andrews described the story of Mrs. Ida Cannonbird from Hillsboro, Oregon, who, starting in 1940, had some strange encounters. She believed that a presence named Wade had installed itself in her mind, claiming to be a messenger of the masters of UFOs and acknowledging that they possessed the technical means to invade people's minds. According to Wade, most abductions are mental illusions induced by a superior intelligence. Visitors are invisible and have powers far beyond our imagination. Pastor Bob Larson believes that Earth is disputed between different civilizations that are not necessarily benevolent, and in this war evil spirits take possession of human bodies in order to dominate certain groups. In UFOs and the Alien Agenda, he was convinced that the extraterrestrials' objective is spiritual in nature and that they intend to divert humanity from the right faith. It is clear that a sinister force is deliberately building a new religious system in preparation for spiritual domination of the world, he noted. Writer Lewis Whitley Strieber confirms the pastor's hypothesis, noting in Transformation that an extraterrestrial confessed to him, "We recycle souls." If we also consider the thousands of possession cases that cannot be attributed to psychiatric disorders, these accounts form an image of the gods/extraterrestrials that is completely different from the heavily promoted one. Possessions could not take place in the case of material entities like ourselves. During a clairvoyant session, sociologist and political science professor Courtney Brown found himself transported to a distant realm, in a huge building, the headquarters of the Galactic Federation, an organization of an invisible, ethereal, transcendental world, an organization from the other side. These spirits, whom we consider extraterrestrials from other planets, spend a limited time in the material world before returning to the perennial astral spheres. A being from that world told him, physical beings would not be able to coordinate the galaxy. He was also told that the inhabitants of the worlds that are part of the Galactic Federation exist simultaneously in the physical and transcendental worlds. In the book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens from 1994, Professor John Mack described the case of one of his patients whom he examined in 1992, conventionally named Peter, who claimed that the aliens who abducted him assured him that they were, essentially, formless spirits. Another patient said under hypnosis that when he was abducted, he was told that Earth was the subject of disputes between different forces from the entire universe, a similar idea to that of Pastor Bob Larson, and the extraterrestrials acknowledged they had a different nature from ours, namely formless, which could lead us to consider them lifeless. Many reports of alleged encounters with extraterrestrials provide statements such as "our time is different" or "we live simultaneously in the past, present and future," which would not be possible in a three-dimensional world that is subject to the laws of physics. Therefore, the place of origin of these extraterrestrials cannot be another planet under any circumstances. Immaterial beings, who need bodies to survive in our three-dimensional world, which explains possessions, can only come from an immaterial world. This is a conclusion that many researchers have come to. For Courtney Brown, the Galactic Federation is an organization from an invisible, ethereal, transcendent world on the other side. David Paladin's 4-year-old son claimed to have been abducted by interdimensional beings from the Cantarian Confederation, which originated outside of our universe. Astronomer Raymond Fowler stated that UFOs come from where we will go after death. As early as 1950, occultist and Meaden Lane in California believed that UFOs and their occupants do not come from other planets, but from another state of reality, which he called etheria, which surrounds us on all sides, although it is invisible. In 1969, French astrophysicist Jacques Vallée also wrote about Magonia, a distant country in the sky, a kind of parallel universe that coexists with ours. In Professor John E. Mack's book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens from 1994, 28-year-old Sarah remembered under hypnosis beings of light but also small, dark entities. Occultist Stanislaus de Guida wrote in 1897 that ghosts and spirits that haunt our world are simulacra that come from the astral. They are legendary angels or demons. The astral is a variable and convertible agent. He also stated, fleeting manifestations of the invisible, appearance of living beings, ectoplasms, various entities, etc. have no physical existence, nor astral virtuality. These are mirages, masks, resulting from an abnormal compromise between two classes of reality. The most important gateway of communication between the astral world and the physical world is the soul. In As It Was from 1976, Cyril Henry Hoskins claimed that the spirit of a Tibetan Lama, Lobsang I, was moved into his body by beings who extracted a small silver cord from the back of his neck and replaced it with that of the Tibetan. Hoskins also claimed that in a parallel reality there are beings called gardeners of the earth, who sometimes choose individuals from whom they extract silver cords, which they replace with those of gardeners. In the same book by Professor John E. Mack, therapist Joe mentioned under hypnosis a golden thread that connects everything that is alive. It feeds you, similar to Cyril Henry Hoskins' silver cord. In ancient Rome, the golden thread was considered a blonde strand of hair which the goddess Proserpina would pluck from the deceased to release their soul from their body. For example, in Virgil's Aeneid, Juno sent Iris to release the soul from the shackles of the body of the Carthaginian queen Dido, to whom Proserpina had not yet plucked the blonde strand of hair and dedicated her head to the god of the underworld, because she did not die a good death but prematurely due to an unexpected passion. Iris cut the strand with her right hand. With it, the warmth of life dissipated from her and her soul flew into the air. Gods, extraterrestrials, angels, demons, spirits. They all represent the same entities, of immaterial nature, present on our planet since forever, where they have been exiled, as many religions of the world claim. As immaterial entities, their place of origin cannot be a three-dimensional one, so they can only come from an immaterial world, as research shows, which refuses to accept the official version of visitors from other planets. Tribal cultures, which we unjustly consider inferior, call these entities spirits. Shamans travel to the spirit world, often under the influence of hallucinogenic substances, similar to journeys through clairvoyance. Some even allow these spirits to use their bodies for short periods of time, as a form of gratitude for the information shared. Arguments in favor of this hypothesis are plentiful, but are not promoted enough by those who want us to believe that we are visited by beings from other planets. Here are some of them. UFOs often make strange movements, ignoring the laws of physics, which would be impossible for material objects. They are most likely the illusions mentioned by some contacts and old religions, or induced in human observers through psychic manipulation or holograms. Occultists claim that spirits often appear in our world in the form of spheres, the same shape that many UFOs have, especially the famous Foo Fighters from World War II. Extraterrestrials claim to come from planets that are thousands or even millions of light years away, which matter could only cross in thousands or even millions of years. Increasing speed to reduce travel time is only possible up to a certain point, which once exceeded leads to the disintegration of matter. Even if an object could exceed the speed of light without disintegrating, according to physicists, it would travel through time, which means a paradox would occur since it would arrive at its destination before leaving. Which is impossible. The Van Allen radiation belt, which surrounds Earth, does not allow any living organism to pass through it. Composed of 3 layers, the first between 1,000 and 6,000 kilometers altitude, the second at an altitude of over 7,000 kilometers, and the third between 15,000 and 25,000 kilometers altitude. It is made mainly of high-energy protons, 10 to 200 megaelectronvolts, high-energy electrons, 1 to 200 kiloelectronvolts, and even antimatter. Since 1962, the Van Allen belt has been accompanied by another belt, which has much more dangerous radiation, artificially created by the United States military through the explosion of 1.4 megatons of TNT at 400 kilometers above Earth. In 2002, the artificial belt was 25 times more dangerous than the natural one. In an interview with journalist Sheena McDonald in 1994, NASA Chief Dan Godlin admitted that mankind cannot venture into space more than 400 kilometers until it finds a way to cross the deadly radiation belt. Radiation electrons can penetrate various materials, including astronaut suits, and can pass through the walls of spacecraft, CNN reported. As no living thing can survive passing through the Van Allen belt, our planet cannot be visited by extraterrestrial beings from outer space in any form. Until the last century, these entities were considered spirits, especially under the influence of occultism in the 18th and 19th centuries. With the development of science fiction literature, the old spirits transformed into beings from other planets. A good example is Lam, one of the spirits with which occultist Aleister Crowley made contact in 1918, a small creature with a very large head. Several decades later, these beings became the well-known gray aliens. The massive implementation of the extraterrestrial hypothesis was achieved through Lab 9, a secret CIA program that created 9 so-called extraterrestrial entities. Lab 9 attracted many important people who promoted the information received from the 9 entities through various means, without realizing that they were only playing the CIA's game. We can easily notice that extraterrestrials lie when it comes to their nature, place of origin and purpose for being on Earth. They appear mainly at night, taking refuge in the darkness. They do not appear in public, only choosing a few individuals for abductions, experiments, or often prophetic messages. Although many explanations have been attempted for this behavior, none are satisfying enough. The only certainty is that the visitors do not want humanity to know the truth about them, but only to be aware of their presence. The followers of these extraterrestrials, who are part of a secret group that aims to enslave humanity by any means necessary, vigorously promote the hypothesis of visitors from other planets while engaging in ancient rituals to invoke the old spirits. Therefore, they only protect the identity of their gods, leading humanity down a false path to keep them away from the truth. However, as the Gospel of Thomas says, there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. To find out who or what the gods really are, their place of origin and the real reason they were exiled to Earth,